Coming up on Network Africa. The United Nations says 1.3 million people in Cameroon are in need of assistance as the Anglophone crisis continues. Kenya's finance minister appears in court, pleads not guilty to charges of corruption. Plus, the health minister in the Democratic Republic of Congo resigns in protest at the handling of the Ebola outbreak in the east of the country. Hello and a warm welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboali. The United Nations says 1.3 million people in Cameroon are in need of assistance as the humanitarian situation in the northwest and southwest regions of the country continues to worsen. According to the UN, around 1,300 people were reportedly displaced last week after attacks that led to dozens of civilian deaths, hundreds of houses burned, and widespread looting of civilian goods. Farhan Haq, deputy spokesman for UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, says that in these two regions, the situation continues to be plagued by human rights and protection abuses and violations. He adds that despite increased humanitarian needs, Cameroon remains one of the most critically underfunded humanitarian responses globally. The conflict in Cameroon's Anglophone region has displaced more than 500,000 people since it broke out in 2016. Separatists are fighting for a breakaway state they call Ambazonia in the English-speaking regions of the country. Here in Nigeria, the special advisor to the president on media and publicity has been explaining why the leader of the Islamic movement of Nigeria, Ibrahim El-Zakzaky, and his wife have not been released despite an earlier court order which granted bail. Mr. Femi Adesina, who was responding to the deadly clash between the police and Shiite members in Abuja, says the case was in the purview of the immediate past Attorney General of the Federation. Mr. Adesina was a guest on our breakfast program, Sunrise Daily.
I know that the immediate past Attorney General of the Federation, in whose purview it was to make pronouncement on that, addressed the issue. If a bail is granted and another case subsists, or there is an immediate filing of an appeal, you have to wait till it is dispensed with. So that's a legal matter which is outside my purview, but as a layman, an unlearned man, as lawyers will call us, we know that until all cases are dispensed with, then you don't say that it has been concluded. When this thing started, you know, it has lasted for months, if not more than a year. They have protested regularly in Abuja. They were doing it peacefully. And so there was no forceful response to those protests. The police will even stand with them as they protested. But when it took a violent turn, they went to the National Assembly, burnt vehicles, killed the policeman, and generally unleashed murder and mayhem on society. The police couldn't just watch. They would then need to escalate their response to it. You would agree that till now it had been minimum force that police used.
Let's get more on this from a professor of international law and the former vice-chancellor of Ado-Ekiti University, Professor Akin Oyebode. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa. So, Professor, what do you make of the continued detention of Ibrahim El-Zakzaky and his wife? This is following several court orders for him to be released.
Well, quite sincerely, the matter has both legal and political dimensions. On the legal issue, it is not totally just to continue detaining somebody who had been granted bail due to the accused person. And El-Zakzaky is not the only person that has suffered this fate. I'm aware that the former National Security Advisor was also granted bail, which the government had refused to honor. He proceeded to the Community Court of Justice of ECOWAS and got a judgment against Nigeria, which Nigeria is yet to pay. I'm talking of the fine. But to come back to the matter at issue, I think the government is doing a disservice to its claim of being a respecter of rule of law and due process by refusing to honor the bail granted. Now, the political aspect is that the government has an option to respond in kind to the Shiite protesters who have vilified and called President Buhari names. In other words, a solution to meet force with force might be to proscribe the organization and to withdraw the carpet from underneath their feet so that now maximum force can be exerted to remove them from circulation. So that is the choice confronting President Buhari. Either to do what is required by law, let the man go, or then clamp down on the dissidents, as it were. But then President Buhari will either have to claim a high moral ground by granting the orders of the court, by playing the role of a statesman, or he wants to act like an ordinary politician who wants to survive at all costs.
Well, Professor, due to the federal government's refusal to release El-Zakzaky, his followers have staged a lot of protests, which sometimes turn violent, resulting in the loss of lives like we saw yesterday. Can the families of the victims of these clashes seek redress at the International Criminal Court, do you think?
Well, unfortunately, individuals might find it difficult to enjoy what you call a locus standi. That is to say, to invoke the jurisdiction of the ICC in order to settle their claims. States ordinarily could go to the court, or the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court in the event that a state is either unable or unwilling to do what is right. The matter could be seized by the ICC. But in this circumstance, the local Shiite people have to exhaust what you call all local remedies. They have to go through the legal process and be satisfied that they've done all that is possible before the matter can be remitted to the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. In the event, Nigeria has to protect its image as a fit and proper member of the international community. The more that we refuse to do what is required, the more Nigeria will enjoy a bad press and a bad profile internationally. So my advice really is that Nigeria should do the needful by either surrendering El-Zakzaky to his family so that he can go and avail himself of medical treatment abroad, or, as I said, go for broke in the alternative by declaring the Shiite an illegal body. But as I said, the president is standing between a rock and a hard place.
Then Professor Akinweye Bode, former Vice Chancellor of Ado-Ekiti University, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on Network Africa. Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari has condoled with the channel's TV management and the family of Precious Owolabi, an NYC member who died from a gunshot wound sustained during a clash between members of the Islamic Movement of Nigeria and the police. He also condoled with the Nigeria police leadership over the death of Deputy Commissioner of Police Usman Umar of the FCT command, who died during the violent clash. President Buhari expressed his condolences in a tweet on his official handle. He said the commitment of the deceased NYC member and the police officer is saluted even in this time of grief. He also reassured Abuja residents to go about their lawful activities, adding that law enforcement agencies are taking action to safeguard the nation. Now, the governors of Benue and Nasarawa State has asked for a revised security strategy for the old Benue Plateau State, which includes Benue, Nasarawa and Plateau states to check in security. Governor Samuel Otom made the call in the state capital at a joint security meeting with his Nasarawa State counterpart, Mr. Abdullahi Sule, who had come with traditional rulers and service chiefs to Benue, seeking an end to border community conflicts.
A warm welcome for Governor Abdullahi Sule from his host, Governor Samuel Otom, at the Benue State Government House, Makurdi. He is accompanied to his first security meeting by traditional rulers and service chiefs who meet their Benue counterparts as they put their heads together on ways to end the conflict.
The most important resource is the people. No political aspiration, no political ambition is worth the life of a single person. Therefore, our total interest is to protect our people, to protect our states, to protect where we come from, so that we will continue to work together.
However, Governor Otom thinks a revised security strategy for the sub-region, including Plateau State, would go a long way in fostering peace, unity and development.
This visit will further strengthen our resolve, and we look forward for the day that myself, yourself, and the Governor of Plateau will come together to renew our commitment to the Benue Plateau that we had and we belong to.
Not done with addressing issues of security and governance, Mr. Otom swears in 15 commissioners for his new cabinet, asking them to make security and service delivery their watchword.
The expectation of the Benue people is very high. Therefore, you must strive to deploy your experience to bear on our collective determination to respond to these challenges and expectations. This includes the imperative to meet our obligations as government, as well as enhance our capacity to respond effectively, even with lean budgetary expenditures.
With the constitution of a new executive council, the governor emphasizes that he will be watching closely to ensure his team delivers on their promises to the people.
Away from Nigeria, Kenya's Finance Minister Henry Rotich has pleaded not guilty to corruption charges over the award of 2 dam tenders a day after his detention. Rotich and other senior officials are accused of conspiring to defraud the public, among other charges. The charges against Rotich stem from a police investigation into the misuse of funds in 2 dam projects planned for the west of the country, overseen by Italian construction company CMC di Ravenna. The Director of Public Prosecutions, Noordine Haji, says Kenya will also seek the extradition of Paolo Porcelli, the Italian director of the company, to face charges. Kenyan journalist Cyprus Ombati joins us now on the program to tell us more about this. Hello Cyprus, what more can you tell us about the finance minister's appearance in court today?
Good evening. From Kenya, we greet you, and it's been a long day for the Finance Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Henry Rotich. He's the Principal Secretary and a number of top government officials who are involved in this scandal, which is now kind of unraveling in court. It has been a long day for them, and since morning they arrived in court at 6 a.m. Up to now, they are waiting to be told the way forward now in terms of being bailed out of police custody. They took plea, and of course they pleaded not guilty, and so the case is gonna continue to the next stage, hearing and mentioning, then the normal process of execution of the case. And that is gonna take some time now. From now.
Well, Cyprus, we actually understand that Mr. Rotich is the most senior official to be arrested since President Uhuru Kenyatta took office in 2013. So what happens next? Will he remain in office while investigations are ongoing?
Well, after they took plea, the court, the magistrate who was presiding over the case, Mr. Ogoti, He directed that the officials involved they must not step their feet, rather their foot in offices. In other words, they will not be appearing in the offices from today until the case is heard and determined. So they will not be going back to the office. Actually, that's what even the law says here, that whenever you are charged for an offense, if you are public service, you don't servant, you don't appear, you don't go back to work until your case is heard and determined, unless there are express orders to the contrary. But so far, Rotich and his principal secretary and a number of officials in the treasury and those from the organization that was involved in the alleged corruption will not be going back to the offices until the cases are determined for now. For Rotich, being appointed by the executive as the president, he stands kind of sacked. He will not be able to come back to the office. Same applies the PS himself, Mr. Kamau Tuge. Even those officials from the Kerio Valley Development Authority who are also involved in the said scam. So their fate is as good as sealed. They will not be coming back to the offices.
All right, Cyprus and Baji, a lot to look forward to. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa. Well, still to come on the program. The WFP warns that some 1.6 million people in cyclone-stricken areas of Mozambique are at risk of food insecurity. Please stay with us.